The marble floor held the cold of the night like a secret, reflecting the fractured glow of the city skyline as Daniel Reyes moved across it in slow, deliberate lines, the soft whisper of his mop echoing through the empty executive hall. He worked as if the building were watching him. Every movement was precise, measured, intentional. The fluorescent lights above hummed faintly, a thin electric buzz that most people learn to ignore. Daniel did not ignore anything. Not the flicker in panel C17 that would need replacing by morning. Not the faint scuff marks near the glass doors, expensive leather shoes, uneven gait, likely someone distracted, important enough not to notice the damage they left behind. He noticed everything. That was the first thing people never understood about him. The second was why a man like him had chosen to disappear into a job like this. Because there had been a time, 15 years ago, when men in rooms like this did not look past him. They listened. No one in this building knew that. And if they did, they would not have believed it. Daniel paused near the edge of the panoramic windows, wringing the mop with steady hands. Below him, the city stretched in quiet defiance of sleep, headlights tracing silver veins through blackened streets, distant sirens dissolving into the hum of midnight. He allowed himself exactly 3 seconds to look. Then he returned to work. Discipline, after all, was not something you turned off. It was something you survived by. His uniform was clean but worn at the edges, the fabric softened by years of use. A small tear near the sleeve had been stitched carefully, almost invisibly. His shoes were polished, not out of pride, but habit. People thought dignity came from status. Daniel knew it came from consistency. A distant elevator chimed. He stopped. The sound did not belong to his schedule. Night shifts in Hale Dominion Tower were predictable. Controlled. Executive floors remained empty after 10. Security logs were tight. Deviations were rare. This was a deviation. He set the mop aside and listened. Voices followed. Laughter. Confident. Unrestrained. Power had a sound. And it was coming toward him. The glass doors slid open with a hydraulic whisper, and a group stepped into the hallway. Tailored suits, sharp silhouettes, the faint scent of expensive cologne cutting through the sterile air. At their center walked Victoria Hale. Even before anyone spoke, the temperature of the room seemed to shift. She moved with a kind of effortless authority that did not need to announce itself. Her heels struck the marble in clean, controlled rhythms. Her posture was perfect, not stiff, but deliberate, like someone who understood exactly how much space she occupied and intended to take all of it. The others followed her orbit. Executives. Advisors. Men who measured their words for a living. And then there was Daniel. Standing in their path, a janitor with a mop. Invisible. Until he wasn't. Victoria's gaze landed on him, not dismissive, not yet. Evaluating. It lasted less than a second. Then she frowned. Why is he here? The question wasn't directed at Daniel. It was directed at the room, as if his presence were an error in the system. One of the men shifted uncomfortably. Probably maintenance, Ms. Hale. Night staff. On this floor? She asked, her voice calm but edged with something sharper. During a closed session? Now the attention shifted fully. Eyes turned. Daniel felt it, the weight of collective judgment pressing against him like heat. He straightened slightly. Not defensively. Just enough. I'm assigned to this level tonight, he said, his voice even, controlled. Cleaning rotation. A pause. It should have ended there. It didn't. Victoria stepped closer. Close enough now that he could see the faint gold threading at the edge of her jacket. The subtle, almost imperceptible detail that cost more than his monthly salary. Do you often listen in on executive conversations while you clean? She asked. The words were quiet. But they landed hard. A few of the executives chuckled, low and cautious, testing whether it was safe to laugh. Daniel met her gaze. Not challengingly. Just directly. No, ma'am, he said. I focus on my work. Another pause. This one longer. The air shifted again, uncertain now. Because there was something in the way he said it. Not submissive. Not defensive. Just true. Victoria tilted her head slightly, studying him. You focus on your work, she repeated. And what exactly is your work? The question was simple. The intention behind it was not a test, or something close to it. Daniel glanced briefly at the floor, at the faint streak he had yet to finish near the edge of the marble. Then back at her. Making sure everything runs smoothly, he said. This time, the laughter came faster. Sharper. Oh, that's good, one of the executives said. That's very good. Victoria didn't laugh. But her lips curved slightly. And you believe, she said, that what you do contributes to this? She gestured lightly around them, the glass walls, the skyline, the quiet power embedded in every surface. Daniel followed the motion with his eyes. Then nodded once. Yes. The silence that followed was brief. But it existed. And in that silence something shifted, just slightly. Victoria noticed it. So she ended it. No, she said, her voice flattening. It doesn't. The moment snapped. Clean. Final. You clean floors, she continued. That's not the same as understanding what happens on them. A few nods. Agreement restored. Order re-established. Daniel said nothing. He didn't need to. Because arguments required investment. And he had learned, a long time ago, not to spend energy where it would not return. Victoria turned away. Get him off this floor during sessions, she said to one of the executives. I don't like distractions. Yes, Ms. Hale. Just like that, he was dismissed. Reduced. Filed away. Daniel stepped aside, moving his cart quietly against the wall as they passed. The scent of their presence lingered, sharp, expensive, temporary. When they were gone, the hallway felt larger. Colder. He stood there for a moment. Then exhaled. Slow. Controlled. There was no anger in it. Only acknowledgement. He picked up the mop again. Resumed his work. Because that was what he did. He finished the floor in silence, each stroke precise, each movement deliberate. When he reached the far end of the hall, he paused again, not for the city this time, but for something else. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He checked it. Lena. A small smile touched his face, brief, but real. He answered immediately. Hey, kiddo. Her voice came through soft, sleepy. Did you finish work yet? Not yet, he said. Almost. A pause. I left your drawing on the table, she murmured. Don't forget to look at it. I won't. You promise? I promise. Another pause. Then, quieter. Love you, Dad. The words settled into him like warmth. Love you too. The call ended. Daniel stood there for a moment longer, the phone still in his hand. Then he put it away. And straightened his sleeve. Small tear. Clean stitch. Still holding. He returned to his cart, and began moving toward the service corridor, the hum of the building settling back into its usual rhythm. But something had changed. Because somewhere, behind those glass walls, a woman who never remembered faces had paused, just briefly, over his. And she did not yet know why. At 2:17 a.m., the elevator doors opened again. This time, she stepped out alone. And she was looking for him. The executive lounge was dimly lit, the amber glow of recessed lights pooling across polished wood and smoked glass, while the faint scent of aged whiskey lingered in the stillness like something deliberately left behind. Victoria Hale stood near the bar, one hand resting lightly against the counter, her reflection fractured in the mirrored panels behind it. She did not belong to hesitation. And yet she had come back. Alone. The silence in the room was different from the hallway, thicker, more private. The city beyond the glass stretched endlessly, a sea of quiet lights beneath a sky that had long since forgotten the sun. She exhaled slowly. Annoyance, she told herself. That was all this was. A minor disruption. A misplaced variable. And yet she had asked security where the janitor had gone. That detail alone irritated her. The door opened behind her with a soft click. Daniel stepped in, pushing his cart just past the threshold before stopping. The wheels gave a faint rubber squeak against the hardwood, out of place in a room designed for silence. He hadn't expected anyone to be there. Especially not her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Victoria turned. "You're off rotation," she said. It wasn't a question. Daniel inclined his head slightly. "I was finishing the floor." Her gaze moved to the cart, then back to him. "You work late." "Yes." "By choice." Another small pause. "By necessity." Something about the answer lingered, not defensive, not explanatory. Just complete. Victoria picked up a glass from the bar, turning it slowly in her fingers. "Do you drink?" The question landed oddly in the room. Daniel considered it, not the question itself, but the reason behind it. "Sometimes." She poured without asking further. Amber liquid caught the light, refracting it in warm, fractured patterns across the counter. She slid the glass toward him. "Tonight qualifies as sometimes," she said. It wasn't an invitation. It was a decision. Daniel stepped forward, leaving the cart behind. The distance between them closed with quiet inevitability. He picked up the glass. For a moment he didn't drink. He simply held it, feeling the weight, the temperature, the faint condensation against his fingers. Then he took a measured sip. The burn was immediate. Clean. Familiar. He set the glass down. Victoria watched him carefully. "You don't act like someone who cleans floors," she said. "And you don't act like someone who forgets people," he replied. The response came without hesitation. Without edge. But it landed. A silence followed. The first real one. Not empty. Charged. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in focus. "Careful," she said. "That almost sounded like insight." Daniel shrugged faintly. "Observation." "And what exactly have you observed, Mr. Reyes?" "Mr. Reyes?" she repeated, tasting the name as if filing it somewhere precise. "What have you observed?" He glanced around the room, the untouched glasses, the half-finished bottle, the subtle disarray that no one else would notice. "You don't celebrate wins," he said. Her expression didn't change. But something behind it did. "You assumed this was a win?" "The others did," he said. "You didn't." A beat. "You watched them more than the meeting," she added. "I watch everything." "Why?" The question came faster this time. Sharper. Daniel met her gaze again. Because not watching had once cost him everything. But he didn't say that. Instead, he answered simply. "Habit." Victoria let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. "You're either very perceptive," she said, "or very reckless. Those aren't mutually exclusive." Another silence. This one longer. She picked up her own glass now, taking a slow sip, her eyes never leaving him. "Tell me something, Mr. Reyes," she said. "If you're so observant, what do you think I do?" The question was a trap. Obvious. Intentional. Daniel didn't rush his answer. He set his glass down again, aligning it carefully with the edge of the counter. Then he spoke. "You build systems," he said. Victoria said nothing. "You don't manage people," he continued. "You position them. You create pressure points, then watch where things break." A flicker. Gone almost instantly. "You don't trust loyalty," he added. "You trust leverage." The room stilled. Completely. Even the hum of the lights seemed to fade. Victoria's fingers tightened slightly around her glass. "Impressive," she said quietly. "For someone who cleans floors." Daniel didn't respond. Because he didn't need to. She stepped closer now. Close enough that the distance between them felt intentional again. "And what do you think happens," she said softly, "to people who think they understand me?" Daniel's answer was immediate. They're usually wrong. Another silence. But this one shifted differently. Less adversarial. More curious. Victoria studied him as if recalculating something she had already decided. You're hiding something, she said. It wasn't an accusation. It was recognition. Daniel's expression didn't change. Everyone is. Not like this. A pause. Then, unexpectedly. What did you do before this? There it was. The question. The one that always came, eventually. Daniel looked at his reflection in the glass behind her, faint and distorted. A man out of place. A life reduced to something manageable. I worked, he said. Victoria's lips curved slightly. That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters. She exhaled slowly, shaking her head. You're frustrating. I've been told that. Another sip of whiskey. Another moment stretching. The tension in the room shifted again, less sharp now, more fluid, like something unspoken beginning to surface. Victoria leaned back against the bar, studying him with open curiosity now. Do you know who I am? She asked. Yes. And that doesn't concern you? No. Why not? Because power only mattered if you feared losing something to it. And he already had. But again, he didn't say that. Instead, because it doesn't change anything. Victoria stared at him. For a long moment. Then she laughed. This time, it was real. Short. Unexpected. Almost disbelieving. No, she said, shaking her head slightly. I don't think you understand that at all. Daniel didn't argue. The bottle between them was half empty now. Time had blurred, quietly, subtly, without either of them marking it. The city outside had dimmed further, the horizon beginning to hint at something softer than night. Victoria set her glass down with a soft click. Let's test something, she said. Daniel raised an eyebrow slightly. She reached into her bag, pulling out a thin folder, sleek, minimal, deliberate. She opened it, sliding a document across the counter. Read, she said. Daniel glanced down. Legal text. Dense. Precise. Unforgiving. His eyes moved quickly. Faster than she expected. He didn't skim. He processed. Clause by clause. Implication by implication. Victoria watched the shift, the subtle tightening of focus, the quiet recalibration behind his eyes. There it was. Proof. You understand it, she said. It wasn't a question. Daniel looked up. Yes. What is it? He tapped the page lightly. A contract, he said. Binding. Conditional. Very difficult to dissolve once executed. Victoria smiled slowly. Good. She picked up a pen. Then held it out to him. Sign it. The words hung in the air. Strange. Absurd. And yet, somehow, inevitable. Daniel didn't take the pen. Not immediately. He looked at her. Really looked this time. At the precision. The control. The curiosity hiding behind calculated decisions. Why? He asked. Victoria's answer came without hesitation. Because I want to see what happens. A long pause. Then, he took the pen. Morning light cut through the glass in sharp, unforgiving angles, illuminating the document still resting on the counter. 2 signatures. 1 decision. Irreversible. Victoria opened her eyes slowly, the weight of the night pressing in all at once. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she saw it. The contract. The name beside hers. Daniel Reyes. And the line above it. Legally binding marital agreement. Her breath stilled. Across the room, Daniel stood by the window, already awake. Already composed. As if nothing had happened. As if everything had. He turned slightly, meeting her gaze. Calm. Unshaken. And in that moment, for the first time in years, Victoria Hale didn't feel in control. Morning arrived without warmth, the pale light filtering through the glass walls of the penthouse suite like something sterile, clinical, revealing more than it softened. Victoria Hale did not sit up immediately. She remained still, one hand resting against the sheets, her gaze fixed on the skyline beyond the windows. The city was waking, slowly, inevitably, but inside the room, time seemed suspended, caught somewhere between decision and consequence. On the table beside her lay the contract. Folded once. Deliberately. As if someone had respected it. Or understood it. Her jaw tightened. "You knew," she said. The words cut cleanly through the silence. Daniel stood near the far window, his posture relaxed but not casual, one hand resting lightly against the glass as he watched the traffic begin to gather below. He didn't turn immediately. "Yes," he replied. No elaboration. No apology. Victoria sat up now, the movement sharp, controlled. "You understood exactly what that document was?" "Yes." "And you signed it anyway?" "Yes." Each answer landed with the same steady weight. Measured. Unshaken. Victoria swung her legs off the bed, standing now, the tension in her body contained but unmistakable. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Daniel turned then. Finally. "I do." Something in the way he said it, calm, certain, made the air in the room feel thinner. Victoria stepped closer, her voice lowering. "You've attached yourself, legally, to one of the most scrutinized positions in the world. There are shareholders, regulatory bodies, press. Do you understand what happens when this becomes public?" "Yes." "And you still—" "I didn't attach myself," he said quietly. The interruption was soft. But absolute. Victoria stopped. "What?" Daniel held her gaze. "You offered," he said. "I accepted." A silence followed. Not loud. But heavy. Because he was right. And they both knew it. Victoria exhaled sharply, turning away as she ran a hand through her hair, pacing once across the room. "This is fixable," she muttered. "It has to be. Contracts can be challenged. Circumstances questioned." "They can," Daniel said. She turned back quickly. "Good. But this one won't be." The words landed like a lock clicking into place. Victoria stared at him. "Why?" she demanded. Daniel stepped forward slowly, his movements unhurried, deliberate. He reached for the contract, unfolding it with careful precision, his fingers tracing a specific clause. "Because of this," he said. She moved closer despite herself, her eyes scanning the section he indicated. A supplemental clause. Obscure. Technical. And devastatingly effective. Her expression shifted. Just slightly. "You added this," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "When?" "Before you signed." The room went very still. "You altered a legal document presented to me," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "I completed it," Daniel corrected. "It was unfinished." Victoria let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "That's not how this works. It is if you don't notice." Another silence. Sharper this time. Because she hadn't noticed. And that, more than anything else, unsettled her. "Who are you?" she asked again. This time, there was no edge. Only clarity. Daniel folded the document again, placing it back on the table. "Someone who reads carefully," he said. "That's not enough." "No," he agreed. "It's not." Victoria stepped closer, searching his face now, not for defiance, but for truth. "You're not a janitor," she said. Daniel didn't respond. "You're not even pretending to be one anymore." "I never pretended," he said. "I just didn't correct anyone." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Why?" A pause. Then, "Because it was safer." The answer hung there. Uncomfortable. Incomplete. But real. Victoria studied him for a long moment, then turned away again, walking toward the window, her reflection merging with the city beyond. "Do you have any idea what this will cost me?" she asked quietly. Daniel's voice came from behind her. Yes. And you don't care? I do. She turned back, surprised by the answer. Then why? She pressed. This time, Daniel didn't answer immediately. Because this question had weight. And answers with weight required precision. Finally, he spoke. Because some things only reveal themselves under pressure, he said. Victoria stared at him. You married me to test something? No. Then what? A pause. Then softer. To stop something. The words barely rose above the quiet hum of the room. But they changed everything. Victoria's expression hardened. Stop what? Daniel didn't answer. Not yet. Because the moment wasn't ready. Instead, he shifted slightly, his attention moving toward the door just before a sharp knock cut through the air. 3 precise knocks. Urgent. Controlled. Victoria's posture snapped back into place instantly. Come in. The door opened, and her chief legal officer stepped inside, followed closely by 2 security personnel. Their expressions were tight, focused. Ms. Hale, the lawyer began, his voice low. We have a situation. Victoria's eyes flicked briefly toward Daniel before returning to him. You always do. Be specific. The man hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. Then, there's been an internal breach flagged overnight. Financial discrepancies tied to a legacy division, one that was supposed to be sealed years ago. Daniel didn't move. But something in his stillness changed. Which division? Victoria asked. The lawyer swallowed. Strategic risk analysis. The name settled into the room like a shadow. Daniel's gaze lowered slightly. Not in avoidance. In recognition. Victoria noticed. Of course she did. Her eyes snapped back to him. You know something. Daniel didn't deny it. Maybe, he said. The lawyer frowned, glancing between them. Ms. Hale, who is this man? Victoria didn't answer. Because she was still looking at Daniel. Still calculating. Still realizing. You said you wanted to stop something, she said slowly. Daniel met her gaze. Yes. Her voice dropped. Is this it? A beat. Then. Yes. The room shifted. Everything that had seemed contained wasn't. Victoria turned sharply to her legal officer. Lock down that division. Full audit. No internal handling, bring in external oversight. Yes, ma'am. And no one speaks about this outside this room. Understood. The team moved quickly, exiting with quiet urgency. The door closed. Silence returned. But it wasn't the same silence. This one carried weight. History. Consequences that had been waiting, and were now beginning to surface. Victoria stepped closer to Daniel again. Slower this time. More deliberate. Start talking, she said. Daniel looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, there was something heavier behind his eyes. Something older. You won't like it, he said. Try me. A long pause. Then, 15 years ago, Daniel began, his voice steady but quieter now. That division didn't have discrepancies. Victoria didn't interrupt. It had evidence. The word hung there. Sharp. Precise. Dangerous. Evidence of what? She asked. Daniel's gaze didn't waver. Corruption, he said. Systemic. Intentional. Profitable. A flicker crossed her face. Gone quickly. That's a serious accusation. It was a proven one. Another silence. He continued. I built the case, he said. Every document. Every link. Every leverage point. Victoria's breath slowed. And then? She asked. Daniel's jaw tightened, just slightly. And then it disappeared. The room seemed to contract. Victoria's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Disappeared how? Daniel held her gaze. Along with everyone who tried to expose it. The weight of the words settled heavily between them. Victoria didn't move. Didn't speak. Because somewhere in the back of her mind, pieces were starting to align. And your role in that? She asked finally. Daniel's answer came without hesitation. I was the last one left. A silence followed. Deep. Unavoidable. Victoria studied him, really studied him now, as if seeing not the man in front of her, but the shadow of everything he had survived. And now? She asked. Daniel's voice was calm. Controlled. But there was something else beneath it now. Something unyielding. Now they know I'm here. The words barely settled before a sharp vibration cut through the room. Victoria's phone. She picked it up. Read the message. And for the first time, her expression cracked. Just slightly. She looked up at Daniel. They've already moved, she said. Daniel nodded once. I know. Another message came through. This one worse. Her voice dropped. They're naming you, she said. Internal leak. Corporate sabotage. They're building a case. Daniel didn't react. Because this part, he had expected. Victoria stared at him. Do you understand what this means? Yes. They're going to bury you. A pause. Then, again. The word landed heavier than anything else. Victoria felt it. And in that moment she understood something she hadn't before. This wasn't beginning. This was repeating. Daniel stepped back slightly, the distance between them returning, not as separation, but as preparation. Get your lawyers ready, he said. Victoria's eyes narrowed. For what? Daniel's voice was quiet. Steady. Certain. For a fight you didn't know you were already in. 2 hours later, Daniel Reyes was in handcuffs. And the entire building was watching. The holding room smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale air, the fluorescent lights above casting a flat, unforgiving glare across the steel table where Daniel Reyes sat alone, his wrists resting calmly against the cold metal surface. There were no windows. Only the low hum of electricity and the distant echo of footsteps passing beyond the door. Time moved differently here. Slower. He didn't fidget. Didn't pace. Didn't ask questions. Because this part of the process, the waiting, the silence, the quiet attempt to reduce a man to uncertainty, was something he understood intimately. Across from him lay a thin folder. Unopened. He already knew what it contained. Fabricated transactions. Altered timestamps. A carefully constructed narrative designed not just to accuse, but to convince. They hadn't gotten lazy. If anything, they had gotten better. Daniel exhaled slowly, leaning back just slightly, the metal chair giving a faint, hollow creak beneath him. 15 years ago, he had underestimated how far they would go. He would not make that mistake again. The door opened. 2 investigators stepped in, one older, composed, the other younger, sharper, eager in the way of someone who still believed truth and procedure were always aligned. They sat across from him. The older one slid the folder forward. Daniel Reyes, he began, voice neutral. You've been flagged in connection with internal financial manipulation and corporate espionage tied to Hale Dominion. Daniel glanced at the folder. Didn't open it. I see, he said. The younger investigator leaned forward. We have documentation placing you inside restricted systems, correlating with data breaches over the last 12 hours. Daniel nodded once. Efficient, he said. The younger man frowned. Excuse me? The timing, Daniel clarified. Very efficient. A pause. The older investigator studied him carefully. You don't seem surprised. I'm not. Why not? Daniel met his gaze. Because if I were them, he said calmly, this is exactly what I would do. The room fell quiet. A different kind of silence. Not confusion. Recognition. The older investigator leaned back slightly, folding his hands. And who is them, Mr. Reyes? Daniel didn't answer. Because naming them here would accomplish nothing. Not yet. The younger investigator tapped the folder impatiently. You're not in a position to be vague. Daniel's expression remained steady. I'm in exactly the position I expected to be in. Another silence. Then the older investigator spoke again, quieter this time. You've been through this before. It wasn't a question. Daniel held his gaze. Yes. The word carried weight. History. Something unspoken but undeniable. The younger investigator glanced between them, unsettled now. Sir? But the older man raised a hand, stopping him. Because he understood something the other didn't. This wasn't a simple case. And the man sitting across from them was not what the file said he was. The door opened again. This time, the shift in the room was immediate. Victoria Hale entered. No announcement. No hesitation. Authority moved with her, filling the space before she even spoke. The investigators stood instinctively. Ms. Hale, the older one said. I need a moment, she replied. Her tone allowed no argument. They hesitated, just briefly, before exiting, the door closing softly behind them. Silence returned. Heavier now. Victoria remained standing for a moment, studying Daniel across the table. Then she sat. Slowly. Deliberately. They're building it fast, she said. Daniel nodded slightly. They always do. Her eyes sharpened. You're not helping yourself. I'm not trying to. A flicker of frustration crossed her face. You could deny it. Push back. Give them something. Daniel leaned forward just slightly, his voice calm. They don't need truth, he said. They need time. And every reaction I give them buys it. Victoria held his gaze. You're letting this happen. No, he said. I'm letting it finish. The words settled between them. Strange. Unsettling. What are you waiting for? She asked. Daniel's eyes shifted briefly to the door. Then back to her. For them to believe they've won. A silence followed. Long. Measured. Victoria leaned back, studying him in a way she hadn't before, not as a problem to solve, but as a pattern to understand. You said this happened before, she said quietly. 15 years ago. Yes. And you survived. Barely. Another pause. What did it cost you? She asked. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Because some answers weren't made of facts. They were made of loss. Finally. Everything, he said. The word was soft. But absolute. Victoria felt it. More than she expected to. And you're willing to go through it again? She pressed. Daniel's gaze didn't waver. No. A beat. Then. I'm making sure I don't have to. The door opened again. This time, it wasn't controlled. It was urgent. A woman stepped in, mid-30s, composed but breathless, a tablet clutched tightly in her hand. Victoria stood immediately. This is a restricted. I know, the woman said quickly. I'm sorry, but you need to see this. Now. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Who are you? Internal audit, she said. Independent oversight, you authorized it this morning. A flicker of recognition. Victoria gestured sharply. Show me. The woman stepped forward, placing the tablet on the table, her hands steady despite the urgency in her voice. It's not just discrepancies, she said. It's a full shadow structure, shell accounts, redirected assets, falsified compliance reports. It's all still active. Victoria's expression hardened as she scanned the data. How deep? She asked. The woman hesitated. Then, high enough that it couldn't have happened without executive protection. Silence. Heavy. Dangerous. Victoria's eyes lifted slowly. To Daniel. You knew, she said. Daniel didn't respond. Because now. He didn't have to. The woman continued, her voice quieter now. There's more. She tapped the screen. A new file opened. Old. Time-stamped. 15 years ago. Victoria's breath caught, just slightly, as she read the name attached to the original investigation. Daniel Reyes? lead analyst. Case architect. Her eyes moved further down. Status, discredited. Case, closed due to insufficient evidence. But now, the evidence was here. Complete. Untouched. Buried. Until now. The room went completely still. A silence so absolute it seemed to press against the walls. Victoria looked up slowly. Her voice dropped. They didn't erase it, she said. They hid it, Daniel replied. Another beat. Then, everything shifted. Victoria straightened, her posture sharpening into something decisive. Get legal, she said to the auditor. Full exposure protocol. No internal filtering. The woman nodded quickly and moved toward the door. Victoria turned back to Daniel. This goes public, she said. All of it. Daniel held her gaze. Yes. And when it does, she continued, there's no controlling what happens next. I know. A pause. Then she asked the question that mattered. Why now? Daniel's answer was simple. Because now, they're visible. The door opened once more. But this time, it wasn't interruption. It was culmination. The investigators returned, along with legal counsel, security, and 2 members of the executive board. The same kind of room. The same kind of audience. As the night he had been dismissed. Victoria didn't sit. She stood at the head of the table. Commanding. Unyielding. Before this proceeds, she said, her voice cutting cleanly through the room. There's something you all need to see. The tablet was placed at the center. Data displayed. Undeniable. The room leaned in. Then, the shift. Confusion. Recognition. Panic. One of the board members spoke, too quickly. This isn't verified. It is, Victoria said. Silence. Another tried. Even if it were, this doesn't implicate. It does, Daniel said quietly. All eyes turned to him. He stood now. Calm. Unrestrained. And for the first time, fully visible. The structure is recursive, he continued. Layered approvals designed to obscure origin points. But the pattern repeats. It always does. He stepped forward slightly. Follow the authorizations, he said. You'll find the same 3 signatures, every time. A pause. Then, the realization hit. Not everyone. But enough. The room went silent. Completely. The second silence. Heavier than the first. Because this one carried truth. Unavoidable. Irreversible. Victoria's voice came next. Cold. Precise. Effective immediately, she said. Those implicated will be removed pending full investigation. No one argued. Because they couldn't. The structure had collapsed. And they were standing inside it. Daniel said nothing more. He didn't need to. Because this time, the truth spoke for him. Hours later, the charges against Daniel Reyes were dropped. Public statements were issued. Names were named. Careers ended. Empires fractured. And in the quiet aftermath, Victoria Hale stood alone in her office, looking out over the city. Behind her, the door opened. She didn't turn. Is it done? She asked. Yes, Daniel said. A pause. Then she spoke again. You could have taken everything, she said. Power. Position. Control. Daniel stepped closer, stopping just behind her. I didn't want it, he said. Victoria turned then. Finally. Then what did you want? Daniel looked at her. Not as a CEO. Not as power. Just as a person. The truth, he said. A silence followed. Softer now. Different. Victoria studied him for a long moment. Then asked quietly. And now? Daniel's answer was immediate. Now I go home. But as he turned to leave, her voice stopped him. Daniel. He paused. Didn't turn. You're still legally my husband. A beat. Then. So what happens next? The early morning air carried a quiet chill, the kind that settled gently against the skin as the city exhaled the last remnants of night, and Daniel Reyes stood outside a modest apartment building, a paper bag of groceries in one hand, watching the first light touch the edges of the worn concrete steps. It was a different world from glass towers and polished marble. Here, the ground was uneven. The paint on the railings had begun to peel. A faint scent of brewed tea drifted from an open window somewhere above, mixing with the distant hum of traffic and the soft echo of a radio playing an old song 2 floors up. Nothing here pretended to be perfect. And that was precisely why it mattered. Daniel climbed the steps slowly, the familiar creak beneath his shoes grounding him in something steady, something real. The hallway light flickered once as he entered, buzzing faintly before settling into a dim, uneven glow. He reached his door. Paused. Then knocked twice. A beat of silence. Then hurried footsteps. The door swung open, and Lena stood there, her hair slightly messy, her eyes bright with something that had nothing to do with the world outside. "Dad!" She threw her arms around him without hesitation, the impact soft but certain, as if she had been holding that moment since the night before. Daniel set the groceries aside just in time, returning the embrace with one arm, steady and sure. "I thought you'd be late," she said, her voice muffled against his jacket. "I said I'd be back," he replied. "You always say that. And I always am." She pulled back just enough to look at him, studying his face with a seriousness that didn't belong to someone her age. "You look tired." Daniel smiled faintly. "Long night." She nodded, accepting that answer the way children sometimes accept things they don't fully understand, but trust anyway. "Did you see my drawing?" she asked quickly. "I did." "And?" He crouched slightly, bringing himself to her level. "It's the best one yet," he said. Her face lit up, not because of the words, but because she believed him. Because with him, she always could. She stepped aside, letting him in, and the door closed behind them with a soft, final click. Inside, the apartment was small but carefully kept. A thin rug covered part of the floor, its edges slightly worn. Books were stacked neatly on a low shelf. On the table, just as she had said, lay a sheet of paper covered in bright colors, bold, uneven lines forming something unmistakable. A man. Standing tall. Cape drawn behind him. Daniel glanced at it for a moment longer than necessary. Not because of the drawing, but because of what it meant. "You made me taller this time," he said. Lena shrugged, a small, proud smile forming. "Heroes are supposed to be tall." Daniel said nothing. Because some corrections weren't necessary. He set the groceries down and moved toward the small kitchen, beginning to unpack them with quiet efficiency. Lena followed, talking as she always did, about school, about a friend who had said something funny, about a teacher who had been unfair in a way that only mattered at her scale. Daniel listened. Really listened. Responding when it mattered. Smiling when it counted. Because this ordinary, fragile rhythm, was the only thing he had ever truly fought to protect. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Soft. Measured. Out of place. Daniel's hands stilled briefly. Then resumed. "I'll get it," Lena said, already moving. "Wait," Daniel said gently. She stopped. Not afraid. Just attentive. He walked past her, wiping his hands once on a cloth before reaching the door. When he opened it, Victoria Hale stood on the other side. The hallway light flickered again above her, casting brief shadows across the sharp lines of her posture, her presence as composed as ever, and yet here, somehow, different. Less distant. More real. Lena peeked from behind Daniel's arm, curious. Victoria's gaze shifted briefly downward, taking in the child, the apartment, the life contained within a space she had never occupied before. "This is where you live," she said. It wasn't judgment. It was observation. "Yes," Daniel replied. A pause. Then Lena spoke, unfiltered. "Who are you?" Victoria looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time in a very long time, she didn't answer as a CEO. My name is Victoria, she said simply. Lena nodded, satisfied enough with that. Then, after a beat, Are you important? The question hung there, unintentionally profound. Victoria considered it, then glanced briefly at Daniel before answering. Not here, she said. Daniel stepped slightly aside. Do you want to come in? He asked. Victoria hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. Then she stepped inside. The space seemed smaller with her in it, not because of who she was, but because of how much of the outside world she carried with her. She moved slowly, taking in the details, the worn edges, the careful order, the quiet evidence of a life built deliberately, not inherited. This is what you chose, she said. Daniel closed the door behind her. Yes. You were offered a position, she continued. A return. Influence. Resources most people would never walk away from. I know. And you did anyway. Daniel met her gaze. Yes. A silence followed. Not tense. Not uncertain. Just honest. Victoria walked toward the table, her eyes falling on the drawing. She picked it up carefully. A hero, she said. Lena nodded enthusiastically. That's my dad. Victoria studied the image for a moment longer than expected, then set it back down gently. He doesn't look like a janitor, she said. Lena frowned slightly. He's not just that. The words landed softly, but with precision. Victoria glanced at Daniel again. I know, she said. Another pause. Then she spoke quieter now. The board is restructuring, she said. Public trust is stabilizing. The investigation is expanding beyond our company. Daniel nodded once. They'll find more. Yes. And you? She asked. What happens to you now? Daniel looked around the apartment, the small table, the drawing, the quiet life waiting patiently for him to return. Nothing changes, he said. Victoria held his gaze. Everything changed, she replied. Daniel considered that, then shook his head slightly. Not the parts that matter. A silence followed, softer than any before it. Victoria exhaled slowly, something in her posture easing, not weakness, but release. You didn't do this for recognition, she said. No. Or power. No. Then why? Daniel's answer came without hesitation. Because it was unfinished. The words settled into the room. Complete. Victoria nodded once, as if something finally aligned. Then she moved toward the door, pausing just before stepping out. You know this doesn't end here, she said. There will be consequences. Attention. Questions. Daniel leaned lightly against the wall, calm as ever. I know. And you're still choosing this? She asked. He glanced toward Lena, who had already returned to her drawing, humming quietly to herself. Then back to Victoria. Yes. A long pause. Then, for the first time since she had known him, Victoria smiled. Not calculated. Not controlled. Just genuine. Then I suppose, she said, this is where you belong. Daniel didn't answer. Because he didn't need to. She stepped out into the hallway, the door closing softly behind her, the flickering light above stabilizing as if the building itself had decided, finally, to settle. Inside, the quiet returned. Lena looked up. Is she your friend? She asked. Daniel walked back to the table, picking up the groceries again. Something like that, he said. Lena nodded, accepting it. Then held up her drawing. Do you think heroes get tired? Daniel paused. Just for a moment. Then he smiled faintly. Sometimes, he said. But they don't stop. Lena seemed satisfied with that. She went back to coloring, adding new lines, new shapes, building something brighter, something stronger. Daniel moved to the window, looking out at the waking city. Cars beginning to move. People stepping into their days. A world that would never know how close it had come to breaking. He stood there quietly, the light rising around him, not as a man who had won something, but as a man who had simply held his ground long enough for the truth to catch up. And in the end, that had been enough. Because dignity is not granted by the world's recognition, it is preserved in the quiet choices a man makes when no one is looking.